Hello and welcome to Ozark Crime Watch. My name is Josh Shackles and I'll be guiding you through today's case. We're investigating the disappearance of Tracy Pickett. Let me take a moment and let's introduce our investigators today.
Hey everybody, my name's Connor. I've lived in the Ozark region, 4-state region now for over 10 years. From Seattle, so a lot of these cases I'm excited to learn about and investigate with everybody.
Hi everybody, I'm Joe Johnson and I'm a criminologist and the owner and consultant at Polymathis Investigative Consultants. Spent a lot of time studying some of the cases in this area, including some that we're going to be discussing on this podcast, so I'm really excited to do that, and I think we've got a great team here.
Hello everyone, my name is Amy Monhay and I do communications for a local church here in the Joplin area. I also do some freelance photography around the community, and I'm a big fan of true crime, so this is kind of exciting because it's local and I do love a good Joplin lore.
I'm Whitney and I'm from Joplin. I've always had a big heart for people and I love finding ways to stay connected and involved in the community. I'm a longtime true crime enthusiast. I'm passionate about shining a light on unsolved cases and making sure their stories aren't forgotten. I also have a deep love for local history because there's something really special about uncovering the stories that are right here in a place that we call home.
Hi everyone, Sarah Moore here. I've been born and raised here in the Ozarks. True crime has always fascinated me, the stories, the mysteries, the pursuit of truth. I'm really excited to explore these local cases and bring thoughtful, compelling content to the community. I'm excited to work with everyone here.
I'm so excited to have all of you guys here with me. My name is Josh Shackles. I am a local historian and community advocate. I've been lucky enough to cover stories of Joplin's crime over the years, and most of these cases are very familiar to me. So I'm excited to bring awareness to these cases. Maybe one of the things that we discuss here in the show will jog somebody's mind and they'll think, man, that happened. And if that happens, reach out to us because we would love to make sure that your tip goes to the appropriate investigator that is currently working on your case. That's an important part of this, is that we make sure that the right people get the tips. All right, let's learn a little bit more about Tracy's disappearance. We have a case file.
In the heavy heat of a Missouri summer on August 11th, 1992, 14-year-old Tracy Ann Pickett left her Joplin, Missouri home with the intention of spending the night at a friend's apartment in nearby Webb City. She was an ordinary teenager, lively, spirited, strong-willed, and fiercely close to her mother, Kay Blazer. Tracy loved pop music, especially Madonna, dreamed of going to California someday, and still had that glowing combination of teenage independence and childlike affection for home. When Tracy asked her mother if she could stay overnight at her friend's place, Kay agreed under the condition that the friend's parents would be home. Tracy said they would. Unbeknownst to her, the apartment was not supervised. The 17-year-old friend was living alone at the time. What was meant to be a simple overnight stay instead set into motion a series of events that would lead to one of the most tragic and enduring mysteries in Joplin's history. That night, a small gathering formed at the apartment. Teenagers drifted in and out. Some brought sodas, others cigarettes and cheap beer. Among the group was an outsider, a man in his early 20s who introduced himself only as Al. His real name was Lowell Andrew Billy. He was not a friend of Tracy's, nor someone her mother would have knowingly allowed near her daughter. Billy had been brought into the group through an acquaintance named Ernest Hensley, the boyfriend of the apartment's tenant. Both men had criminal pasts, having met in prison in Oklahoma. Their presence that night turned what should have been a routine evening into something far more dangerous. Billy arrived in a black van with Oklahoma plates, distinctive for its 2 sunroofs and louvered side windows. Inside the van, witnesses later reported seeing a handgun. Throughout the evening, Billy made Tracy uncomfortable. He stared at her persistently, shadowed her movements, and made crude, inappropriate comments, one particularly alarming remark about whether she was wearing underwear. As the night wore on, Tracy decided she wanted to return home to change clothes. She had only the outfit she wore, a pink t-shirt and cut-off jean shorts, and had left her belongings, including her beloved oversized purse and shoes, behind at the apartment. Billy offered to drive her back to her house in Joplin and return her to the party afterward. Tracy agreed. It was a choice born out of practicality, or perhaps a desire to avoid conflict. She climbed into Billy's van barefoot. She was never seen again. Lowell Billy later told investigators that he had driven Tracy to downtown Joplin and dropped her off near a pawn shop, letting her walk the remainder of the way home. No one saw her at the pawn shop, no store clerks, no customers, no friends, no witnesses. No one saw Tracy anywhere after she left that Webb City apartment. In the early morning hours of August 12th, just as dawn began to break, neighbors living near the apartment reported hearing a disturbance. A barefoot girl was seen running down an alleyway, screaming, "Get away from me! Leave me alone!" The girl matched Tracy's description. In those critical moments, no one called the police. No one intervened. In that sliver of time between night and day, a young girl disappeared into the shadows. Back at Kay Blazer's home, a different kind of confusion and fear began to unfold. 2 eerie messages had been left on the Blazers' answering machine. The calls were made by a female voice that Kay did not recognize. Both messages claimed that Tracy was on her way home to change clothes. One call came late during the night, and another was placed around 10 a.m. the following morning. The tone was casual but unsettling. Tracy's mother immediately knew something was wrong. Tracy never made it home. By midday on August 12th, unable to shake her rising panic, Kay drove to the friend's apartment herself. She searched the rooms, called Tracy's name, and made a heartbreaking discovery. Tracy's shoes neatly tucked into a bedroom closet. Her purse remained untouched. Every mother's worst fear was realized. Tracy was gone. Kay immediately contacted the Joplin Police Department to report her daughter missing. As was often the case with teenage disappearances at the time, authorities initially treated it as a possible runaway situation. Tracy was 14 after all. Maybe she had a fight with friends. Maybe she needed space. But Kay knew better. Tracy was not the kind of girl to run off barefoot into the night, leaving behind everything she cherished. Within hours, the case shifted from a missing child report to a suspected foul play investigation. Interviews with the partygoers at the apartment revealed troubling details. Everyone agreed on one crucial point. Tracy had left with Al. They described his black van in detail, right down to the Oklahoma plates and sunroofs. They recalled his unnerving fixation on Tracy and his inappropriate behavior. It wasn't long before investigators pieced together that Al was Lowell Andrew Billy, a man with a violent past and deep ties to the criminal underworld. By the time authorities identified him, Billy had fled Missouri and returned to Oklahoma. Law enforcement coordinated with the Tulsa Police Department, and within a week they located him along with the infamous black van. The van, upon inspection, had been thoroughly cleaned. It yielded no evidence. Billy stuck to his story. He dropped Tracy off in downtown Joplin, safe and sound. Without a body, without forensic evidence, and without an eyewitness placing Billy at the scene of a crime, investigators were forced to release him. Despite the lack of arrest, Billy remained the prime suspect. Police were certain he had harmed Tracy. Her mother was certain too. The pain of not knowing settled heavily over Joplin. In the days and weeks that followed, volunteers flooded the streets with missing posters bearing Tracy's picture. Candlelight vigils were held. Kay gave emotional interviews, pleading for any information that could bring her daughter home. Community members remembered the story of the girl who disappeared barefoot into the night and began locking their doors tighter. Joplin would never be the same. In 1993, a year after Tracy vanished, the worst fears about Lowell Billy were confirmed. In Tulsa, he picked up a 21-year-old woman who was hitchhiking. He held her captive for 4 hours, physically assaulted her, and raped her. The survivor lived to tell her story. Billy was arrested, tried, and convicted of first-degree rape, kidnapping, and forcible sodomy. In 1997, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. To Joplin detectives, this conviction felt like a cruel vindication. They had been right about Billy, but it was not enough to bring Tracy home, nor enough to tie him definitively to her disappearance. Billy served his time and was later jailed again for violating his sex offender registration requirements. Yet in the matter of Tracy Pickett, he remained a free man. Over the years, numerous searches were conducted based on tips and rumors. In 2005, police attempted to drain an old mining pit north of Joplin after receiving a credible tip suggesting Tracy's remains might be hidden there. The pit, a relic from Missouri's mining past, proved almost impossible to empty. Water poured back in faster than it could be pumped out. The effort was abandoned, and no remains were found. Another significant lead emerged in 2018, many years after Ernest Hensley's death. A family member of Hensley came forward with information. It led investigators to a series of abandoned tailing ponds near Lone Elm Road, close to where Hensley had lived in 1992. The ponds were drained and scoured with sonar technology. Divers searched the murky depths. Once again, hope flickered, and once again, nothing was found. Despite the setbacks, Tracy's case was never closed. Joplin police have consistently maintained that the investigation remains active. They continue to encourage anyone with information, no matter how minor or dated, to come forward. Advances in forensic science, including DNA testing unavailable in 1992, have kept possibilities alive. Investigators have expressed optimism that new technology or new witnesses could one day solve the case. In 2023, at a vigil marking 31 years since Tracy disappeared, the crowd stood under a warm Missouri sky. Some held candles, some held signs. All of them held the weight of the unanswered question, what happened to Tracy Pickett? Joplin Police Captain Nick Jimenez reiterated that the case remains open. He said that investigators continue to work leads and that no detail is too small to make a difference. All it takes is one person speaking up, one piece of information, and we could bring closure to a family that has waited far too long. Among the crowd were teenagers who had been born decades after Tracy disappeared. Yet they knew her name. They knew her story. It was passed down like folklore, but heavier, closer to the bone. The mystery of Tracy Pickett's disappearance is not just a local tragedy. It stands as a chilling reminder of how quickly a young life can vanish, how fragile the barrier is between safety and sorrow, and how deeply a community can bond over the shared burden of seeking justice. Tracy would be 47 years old today. Perhaps she would have fulfilled her dream of seeing the Pacific Ocean. Perhaps she would have built a family of her own. Her life, frozen in time at 14, remains a vivid and painful what if. There is no grave, no monument, only candles, prayers, posters, and the relentless love of a mother who refuses to let her daughter's name fade. The case of Tracy Pickett remains open. Her story remains unfinished, and the people of Joplin, along with anyone who hears her story, are still waiting. Waiting for answers, waiting for justice, waiting for Tracy to come home.
All right, so obviously, if you've lived in Joplin for any amount of time, you've heard about this case, you've been impacted by this case. What are your initial thoughts on this, guys? What do you think we're looking at here?
Well, my initial thought after hearing the case file just now, after being familiar with this case for a long time, was that Tracy was feeling uncomfortable around Billy, but yet decided for some reason to leave with him in that van. And I've always wondered, how much of an investigation or how much follow-up Webb City police did with the attendees at that party, and whether there was more that took place in that house before Billy ever left.
I'm pretty sure Webb City Police Department at that time was just a few officers, so they would have been stretched pretty thin.
Because it appears that the only investigations that's been done from all the evidence that I've been able to come across is Joplin Police Department and just Tulsa interviewing Billy when they had him for that other charge.
One of the details that jumps out at me is the phone call. Mm-hmm. If a girl calls and says, "Oh, she's on her way," but nobody knows who that is. How does that fit into the overall case? It's got to be an important detail, but where does the girl making the call come from?
Again,
And why wasn't she ever identified?
So the thing with me that I think about that is like kids at a party, I could see definitely back then when there's no cell phones, maybe pagers, is like maybe like, hey, I'm going to head home. Will someone just call my house real quick and let me know I'm on my way home? Supposed to be a quick thing. I mean, that's happened to me in the past, and like,
Yeah.
But the second one is weird because like when that one came in, hours later, right? So the first one came in, there's a voicemail left, and then the second one comes in later, another voicemail saying the same thing. It's kind of weird.
I thought it was really strange.
The second one's weird. The first one kind of makes sense to me. I'm like, okay, but the second one, that's weird.
I think it's important that we, note the fact that these two people, these two men, the boyfriend and Al Lowell, they're much older than these young people, and there's definitely a power dynamic. So when we think, why was this, when this girl was uncomfortable, why did people allow it to happen? It's because, it doesn't, you're fine, it's fine. And she probably convinced herself, I don't love this, but I don't have a choice. And
I'm sure that's happened to a lot of young
Maybe in
women,
that
especially
case.
during that time.
Absolutely.
Definitely that time, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, in a modern setting, if my teenage children were to say, hey, I've got these adult friends, I would be like, what is going on here?
Suspicious.
Red flag. But back then, I can think of friends that I had that were 8 to 10 years older, and it wasn't weird.
And
So, I don't know.
And the thing is that to the kids it wasn't weird. To the parents, even Tracy's mom would not have let her attend if she had known the facts of that.
That's true.
That part, you're right.
That's true.
And
Was Tracy only 14?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think back at those times, those are the times that I kind of wish we could get back to. That's when kids could go out and play until the street lights came. There wasn't stranger danger and just,
Especially in Webb City.
It wasn't as well known, or we didn't hear about it like we do today. So the safety aspect, she could have thought, well, it's an adult. I'll be okay. It'll be fine. He's kind of weird, but it'll be okay.
So many of these cases just all hinge on two lives converging at the wrong time.
All right, guys, so it's theory time. Let's talk about what might have happened to Tracy. So, there's a lot of evidence that kind of points one direction, but it really could have gone down any possible way. We're talking about a time where there's really no cameras, there's no digital signatures, that you can't trace her GPS on her phone. So what do you think happened?
So I think, I don't know, looking at the stuff from over the years, digging into this over the last couple of weeks, like, obviously Al, our good friend Al here, has probably a lot to do with it. The fact that he has a pretty violent past after this all happened, and to know that he's still, I don't know, doing things, breaking the law, I don't know, there's a lot of red flags here.
Yeah, I saw that he was indicated in a court document for January of 2025.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he had the van to get away with it. Obviously, he has he has a lack of empathy in some way,
I like him as our killer too. I feel like there's a lot of evidence that points that way, but there's just so many details that we don't have. And for me, really one of the big ones is the phone call. Mm-hmm. Because how did the two grown men convince a different teenage girl to make this call and then not fess up to it later? Because I remember what it was like in the schools during this time, and when the police came through to investigate people and to talk to people, it would have been a big deal to not say something, if that was you. So, where does she come from?
I think that Lowell Billy admitted that he was the last one to see her. He said he dropped her off in front of a pawn shop on Main Street. So he admittedly was the last person to see her that attended that party. So that's a fact, according to him. I mean, that's his own statement.
Right. So, I mean, there is the possibility that he let her go and someone else, another creeper, came along and picked her up.
Yeah, just by coincidence.
That was my
Right.
thought is, how is it confirmed that it could have been him again? It could have been someone else.
I think it just has to do with they were at a party together. He gave her a ride. He has a history of this type of behavior. He had connections here where disposing of a body. Whatever was said on Hensley's deathbed was compelling enough for them to do 2 searches and still not come up with anything, but they were, some of the searches were unable to be successful as far as getting all the water out, is my understanding.
Yeah. Actually, I think that was the case with both of the major searches, is that they couldn't get enough water out of the mine shaft that they were looking in.
So it's possible he had absolutely nothing to do with it. I just think it's highly unlikely.
Yeah, I think it's highly unlikely. He seems pretty guilty.
Well, and to go back to, the question of how could they have gotten this girl to make the phone calls, 2 phone calls, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, I'll circle back to if she thinks she's going to be harmed by these people, she'll do what she needs to do, and she could probably carry a lie if she is in fear of her own life.
You're talking about the person who made the call. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there was probably some intimidation because, Hensley had a record. He's no longer with us. He had a record, and none of these people were, what you would call, your person you'd want to take home to meet the parents. So I imagine there could have been any kind of coercion done necessary to get the means met, the end, justify the end.
So, I've been following this case pretty much my entire life. I've spent countless hours researching little details of this case and spending time out in the woods looking for what they might have done with Tracy, following theories. When I was in school, I actually had one of Tracy's old textbooks, and I remember, kind of how much that hit me, that, her name, she had signed in this textbook that I carried with me all year. So it's always been kind of close to home for me, but I feel like it's really impacted the community. I know, Joe, you've had some interaction, friends and family through the memorials and things.
Tracy's mother came to a memorial that we did a couple years ago, and she's just thankful that people haven't forgotten about Tracy. Is what I get from visiting with her, and that she's never going to be complete. She's never going to be a whole person, and people always wonder, what is justice? What is justice? And I think, justice is kind of situational sometimes. I don't know. One person's justice may not be another person's justice. But for me, what really tugs at my heart in cases like this is that there's no final resting place for Tracy. There's no place for her mother to go and visit. And that strikes close to home, I think, in all our hearts. Because I'd go visit Tracy's final resting place if she had one. And that's, that I'm making an assumption that Tracy's no longer with us. We don't know that, but 33 years.
My heart just breaks for people that knew her. I have also been in the position to lose a daughter, although I know where she is. And I cannot even imagine what that would be like to not know where your child is after all these years. So my hope is that someone listening to this will hear a detail or think of something that reminds them of something, and all of a sudden the truth will come to light.
You know, one of the things when we think about close to home is, what was the town like then? What was the time like then? And I even think about, as far as this case, and for investigative purposes, we have forensic science that we did not have 30 years ago. I've always wondered where that van is at, because I don't care how good he scrubbed that van, if there's any evidence in there, it could be found. And so I always wonder why there's not any follow-up on this. There just doesn't seem to be follow-up on this case to me. That's my opinion. I think that there's enough, we know, I can tell you right now where Low Billy lives. I know his address. So it's not that difficult to find people and to go ask them questions. And I just really kind of wish the cops would consider doing that sometimes.
All right, let's talk our final thoughts here. Who has one last thing to throw out?
My final thought is that Tracy's story is definitely a devastating reminder of how fragile justice can be without hard evidence. Just like you were talking about the van in that kind of situation, all the what ifs on this case.
My final thought is really just a hope that if anyone has anything about this case, even just small, that they would reach out to us, reach out to law enforcement, because something that seems so small to you could be huge for the case.
I think it's very important that we all remember Tracy. She was a bright-eyed 14-year-old girl with a whole life ahead of her.
She's a huge fan of Madonna. She had Madonna posters all over her bedroom, her mother told me.
That's awesome.
And just loved that pop music of the 90s.
That's neat.
That all the 14-year-olds love, and evidently the 22-year-olds still love it, and the 30-somethings love it. It's not so bad.
All right, if you have any details about this case, please reach out to the Joplin Police Department, 417-623-3131. Please join us next week as we investigate the case of Ashley Freeman and Laura Bible. All right, see you next week, guys.
Bye.